There are many ways people listen to Vision, including in cars through the Vision app.
The Vision app is compatible with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so if you have mobile coverage, you can stream any of Vision's live radio channels in crystal clear quality and enjoy a growing range of on-demand podcasts all on the go. There are other ways to connect your phone to your vehicle speakers too. You can see detailed instructions when you Google ways to listen to Vision.
However and wherever you listen to Vision, you can be sure that the announcers, programs and music will help you look to God daily.
A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
But first, an eyewitness account of a rally disrupted by protesters in Adelaide that was organised by Christians in support of Israel. One of the keynote speakers of the Never Again Is Now event in Adelaide on Sunday joins us now to give her insights and perspectives on the success of the rally and the attempts of pro-Palestinian protesters to disrupt it. Ashlyn Weiss is Australian Christian Lobby State Director for South Australia, and she joins us now on the line. Ashlyn, welcome.
Hi, thanks Andrew, good to be here.
Ashlyn, for those of us who don't live in Adelaide and were not a part of the rally, tell me the story of the rally, how it was organised and who organised it.
Sure, so the rally was called Never Again Is Now, and that movement was organised by an Anglican pastor in Sydney, Mark Leach, who saw the problem of anti-Semitism rising in Australia since the events of October 7th. Specifically, on October 9, there was that awful rally outside the Sydney Opera House calling for Palestine to be free from the river to the sea and gas the Jews. A lot of hatred and incitements to violence. So Mark saw the problem there and he was determined to do something about it. And so Never Again Is Now was inspired by a movement in the UK called Christians Against Anti-Semitism. So he organised a rally in Sydney a couple of weeks ago that was very successful. There was no counter-protest there, thankfully, so they had some really solid speakers like John Anderson, former Deputy Prime Minister, and Scott Morrison. So we organised similarly through Never Again Is Now a rally in Adelaide. We got around 650 South Australians gathered, but unfortunately we did encounter quite a lot of opposition on Sunday. Okay, so this was the second Never Again Now rally in Australia. Are there more rallies planned for other parts of Australia out of interest? There are, yes. So you can follow Never Again Is Now online and you'll see that they're planning to take this around Australia. Excellent. So this was the second one. So in the lead up, was there any indication that there'd be disruption or protests? There certainly was. We were made aware of the counter protest being organised by a group called Lil Aqsa, and that's headed up by a young lady here in Adelaide. And our confidential media release was embargoed, leaked from the media to organise this. We also experienced this media release was then tampered with and a false location was released for the event. So they were obviously trying to tamper with the organisation of the event to disrupt it and stop people from coming. So hang on, let's stop there, Ashley, in case people missed that. So you released a media release to credible media outlets in just South Australia. Was that Australia-wide you did that? That was not myself. That was South Australia-wide, but it was embargoed. So essentially what happened is they used that to falsely advertise a fake location for the event and also to reveal the details of some of our key speakers to intimidate them. So some of our speakers were being harassed online prior to the event, which was really unfortunate to see. Yeah, so someone in media has released that press release to outside bodies and organisations and individuals, and that's become something that was weaponised and used against the rally. That's correct, yeah. And what sort of intimidation and threats were made to the speakers prior to the rally even starting? So they were essentially just being bullied and, called a lot of hateful things. There are those who do unfortunately believe that Hamas is legitimate in its aims to destroy Israel and to target Jewish people in the process. And there are those who believe that the existence of Israel itself is itself a racist endeavour. So this was the kind of hate speech that our speakers were targeted with. I wasn't myself, but yeah, look, it did cause quite a ruckus prior to the event, but thankfully SAPOL was really excellent in dealing with all of that. They were all hands on deck on the day on Sunday. There was a heavy police presence there, but unfortunately they weren't able to stop the protesters from drowning us out with their noise. So it was a very rowdy event, and unfortunately some members of the Jewish community left that protest before our first speaker had even finished. That rally rather, because of the hatred that they were sort of being exposed to.
So the people who were supposed to benefit from the rally and feel a sense of solidarity and a sense of support left the rally early because they felt intimidated by the protesters.
Yeah, unfortunately that's right, Andrew. And look, the sole purpose of this rally was to gather against anti-Semitism as organised by Christians in partnership with the Jewish community. And regardless of your geopolitical views, anti-Semitism isn't okay, and we don't want our Jewish Australians to feel as if they are targets of hatred. Here in Australia, they add value to our society, and being Jewish is an ethnicity, so anti-Semitism is a form of racism. I was at university still last year, and I can vouch that there was a lot of hatred there with protests by the university Marxist group. And I've spoken with Jewish people in Adelaide. One synagogue near me has had to take down their signs and stop accepting new people as a security measure, which is just really sad that that's what it's come to.
Yeah, were you surprised at the rally on Sunday at the level of opposition? Did it take you a little bit by surprise? Did you think, oh, that's a Sydney and Melbourne thing, but here in peaceful Adelaide, we don't see that sort of thing?
I was a little bit taken aback. And also the fact that they didn't stop shouting for the entire event was quite awful. Some of their posters with the classic "From the River to the Sea" slogan, which if taken literally would require the destruction of Israel altogether. So no, it wasn't a pleasant experience, although I think the messages that were spoken from the steps of Parliament from Never Again Is Now was really positive and well received. And those who were able to stick it out and stay for the event, I think certainly experienced a lot of support and love from the Christian community. We also were able to sing a couple of worship songs and pray together. So that part of it was really positive.
Was there any attempt by the police to move the crowd on who were disrupting and causing all the noise?
There was discussion of that, and I think the police on the ground would have been willing to do that, except that they did receive a direction not to in the end. And look, it is free speech, but unfortunately, because it was getting so hateful, I guess, and divisive, we were wanting that to move on. But yeah, it's a bit of a tricky decision to make, because once you start arresting people, if they don't stop, it would just have caused even more disruption. So in the end, we just stuck with it. We trusted that, it was still worth going ahead. And I'm glad that we did. It was positive to collaborate with the Jewish community here in Adelaide, but I'm hopeful that in future there'll be less of this kind of hatred and more people standing up against anti-Semitism.
Yeah, absolutely. How many speakers did you have at the rally?
We had 7 speakers, including myself. So I spoke on behalf of the Australian Christian Lobby. The ACL have created a petition in response to the events of last year against anti-Semitism. Our petition has 11,000 signatures, and we're going to present that to a federal member of Parliament, Julian Leeser. So that's 11,000 Australians who have said, no, we don't want anti-Semitism in Australia. It has no place here. I also mentioned in my talk that I recently visited the Holocaust Museum in the United States, and I'm just reminded afresh of the importance of learning from history and to stop these kinds of things right from the beginning. it might not have escalated to something as serious as what happened in World War II, but it's always good to stand up against these things right from the beginning. And the Word of God reminds us to do that in Deuteronomy 4 verse 9. He calls us to be careful and watch ourselves closely that we don't forget these things and don't let them fade in our heart, to teach them to our children, to make sure that our generation learns from prior tragedies in the past.
Yeah, it's interesting that you raise history there, Ashlyn, because I've thought a lot about this as well. And obviously during World War II is when the Holocaust happened, but I think the battle was lost in Germany in the 30s when Hitler and his Nazi party started to take power and started to intimidate and threaten and bully the Jews back then. And I think about this, and I'm sure there were many good Christian, because it would be naive of us to say that every German in the 1930s was evil. Some of them were Christians, God-fearing Lutherans who believed in Jesus. And I believe many Christians, when that intimidation and that bullying and that persecution of the Jews began in the 30s, probably just didn't want to get involved, didn't know what to do, kind of just watched it and thought, oh, this isn't great, but nothing was done, was it? And it just escalated from there, didn't it?
That's right. And I think if there's one thing we can learn from history, it's that no nation radicalizes overnight. These kinds of things, you don't just end up with the gas chambers and the concentration camps all of a sudden. But evil is first tolerated in small portions, and then it's normalized, then it's celebrated, and then it's enforced. So it's really important, especially for the church, Andrew, to stand up against this straight away. And that's a part of our witness as well, is to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves.
Absolutely. And the Christian church, I believe, has a great history of doing this. Of the civil rights movement in the US, it was heavily backed by Christians, both black and white Christians. Obviously, William Wilberforce, abolishing slavery in the British Empire was a great example of Christians defending the weak and those that can't defend themselves. And I think, sadly, like in modern day Australia, the Jewish minority, and they're one of many minorities, they're not the only minority in Australia, seem to be the most persecuted right now. And it really is time, isn't it, for the church to stand up and say, hey, we don't want this in our society.
Yeah, absolutely. And the principle of loving your neighbour as yourself, that's a Christian principle, and our nation, Australia, is founded on Judeo-Christian values. And I think a lot of these movements that we're seeing, particularly with the radical left partnering with Hamas right now, is a threat, not firstly to our democratic principles, but to our Judeo-Christian values, which underpin all of that. I think it's really important for Australians not to take the values that we've inherited and our freedom for granted, because, Australia, we haven't had, thankfully, too much conflict on our local land. We haven't experienced invasion or that kind of thing, really. So we are susceptible, I would suggest, to taking these things for granted, having not fought necessarily for our freedom ourselves. So I think, it's great for us to be vigilant. Thomas Jefferson once said the price for freedom is eternal vigilance, and that goes hand in hand with standing up for these Christian values and treating each other as equal, no matter what your racial or ethnic background is.
Absolutely, Ashlyn. And so you are the State Director for the Australian Christian Lobby in South Australia. Just so for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better, you said you were at university last year. What were you studying?
Sure. So I was studying law. I finished my honours in law last year, and that was really my introduction into things like the ACL. I was also working for a federal senator for 4 years during university. So I dipped my toe in the political world while I was studying, and I started using my skills that I was learning at law to make submissions to Parliament on a lot of these issues that were concerning me, things related to the pro-life movement, prostitution, which I was particularly passionate about because I'd been involved in Christian ministry to do with women exiting prostitution. So all of these issues were at the front of my mind when I was studying law, and that's how I became involved with the ACL. And just started a month ago or a month and a half ago as ACL State Director here in South Australia.
And you seem like you're doing a great job already, Ashlyn. Out of interest, you're obviously fairly young compared to some of us today. Are there many people your age you're finding like you, Christian people who want to get involved and want to engage in the political space and in society at large and just not sit back and watch things happen?
Yeah, I think politics is a hard sell because politics is a long-term game. You don't often see results straight away in the world of politics. But what I like to tell people is where we've come to now in terms of seeing Australia move away from a lot of its Christian heritage is a result of long-term changes and, bit by bit, inch by inch, us moving away from that. And so if we want Australia to return to those values, we've got to be in it for the long-term game. There are, some really committed and dedicated young people that I'm very thankful to know and who are involved in the ACL or similar movements. And my heart is to really bring more young people into that because we are the next generation. We're the next generation of politicians, business leaders, parents. So it's really important, I think, for young people to have a voice on these issues and to be educated. Australians are notoriously not so politically engaged, and that is both endearing and concerning. We inherently seem to trust what's going on and yet hate it at the same time. So I'd really love to be aware, especially Christians, how they can use the tools of democracy to advocate for the things that God wants us to advocate for.
Absolutely. I think, we have been an incredibly lucky nation up until now, haven't we, with lots of natural resources. I think for 100 years we farmed sheep and sheared the sheep and sent the wool to Britain and the US and made a lot of money doing that. But like you said, we've inherited this in prosperity and this great standard of living. But like you said, I think your generation in particular have to be very vigilant moving forward that we protect the values and the rights and the opportunities that we have taken for granted for a long time. And Ashlyn, my sense is with young people like you in Australia, there is hope for the future. So I just want to commend you for your commitment to what you're doing for the Australian Christian lobby and for, Australian society at large. And we sincerely wish you all the best in your new role at the ACL there as the State Director of South Australia.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.